Instead, we have the opportunity to make a habit of empathy, to recognize ourselves and each other.
Mr. President, as we speak to you in the White House Library, a constitutional lawyer, former law professor, as you work through the process for you personally in selecting a Supreme Court nominee, what are you thinking?
Well, there's some benchmarks that you have to make sure you hit. Obviously, you want somebody who is highly qualified, who knows the law. I want somebody who obviously has a clear sense of our Constitution and its history, and is committed to fidelity to the law, is going to make their decisions based on the law that's in front of them. But as I've said before, I think it's also important that this is somebody who has common sense and somebody who has a sense of how American society works and how the American people live. I said earlier that I thought empathy was an important quality, and I continue to believe that. You have to have not only the intellect to be able to effectively apply the law to cases before you, but you have to be able to stand in somebody else's shoes and see through their eyes and get a sense of how the law might work or not work in practical day-to-day living. And a good example of this, the Lilly Ledbetter case that came up a while back, where the justices, I believe, misinterpreted the law in closing the door to a lawsuit by a woman who had worked for 20 years and had been paid less than her male counterparts. She didn't know that she was getting paid less. When she discovered it, she immediately filed suit to get back pay, and the suggestion was somehow that she should have filed suit earlier. Well, I think anybody who's ever worked in a job like that understands that they might not know that they were being discriminated against, and it doesn't make sense for their rights to be foreclosed. That's the kind of case where I want a judge not only to be applying the law in front of them, but also to understand that as a practical matter, a lot of times people have weak bargaining power. Now, in some ways, it might cut the other way. I want a judge who has a sense of how regulations might affect businesses in a practical way. And so when they're interpreting a statute, that they are seeing is congressional intent being met in this kind of circumstance. If there is a farm program somewhere, somebody who can take the time to learn about how farms work, that's helpful. So in all these cases, what I want is not just ivory tower learning. I want somebody who has the intellectual firepower, but also a little bit of a common touch and has a practical sense of how the world works.
And that's what empathy is?
Well, that's what empathy is to me. And I think that's those criteria of common sense, practicality, a sense of what ordinary Americans are going through every day, putting that in the mix when their judges are looking at cases before them is very important. Keep in mind that the Supreme Court, by definition, only gets the tough cases. And even at the Supreme Court level, probably 95% of the cases are going to be determined by some clear statutory language, strong precedent. But there's going to be 5% of the cases there where the language is ambiguous, where the constitutional precedent is not clear. And in those situations, you want a judge who has a sense of what's going on in the day-to-day lives of the American people and has some practical experience. And I'm confident that there are people who combine both the intellectual qualities and the qualities of judgment and common sense that will make them a great Supreme Court justice.
Is it safe to say that an announcement...
different times call for different justices. Each justice has their own strengths as well as weaknesses. And what I just want to make sure of is that any justices I appoint are people who have not only the academic qualifications or intellectual capacity, but also the heart and the feel for how Americans are struggling in their day-to-day lives, and also an appreciation, I think, for how, even though we live in new times, there are some time-tested principles embodied in our Constitution that have to be respected.
Well, let me follow up on that, because you could have 2 or 3 more appointments in the next couple of years.
Right.
Is that the imprint that you want on the Supreme Court?
You know, I don't want to jump the gun. Obviously, nobody else has announced their retirements. But the criteria that I described, a strong intellectual grasp of the law, an appreciation for the timeless principles of the Constitution, and a sense of common sense and compassion and empathy for ordinary Americans, so that everybody is heard. Those are all qualities that I think make for a great Supreme Court justice.
See the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.